Thank you very much for that. Dipan Mehta, Director at Elixir Equities, is joining in now. Dipan, any thoughts on IDFC? Up 4.5% today, very large volumes. It's been a big outperformer of late. This month itself, the stock has rallied close to about 15%. What have you made of the price action? There is a lot of expectation about, the corporate structure changing, etc. Is this attractive at current levels?
Good afternoon, Rima, and thanks for having me on your show. I think it's a play on IDFC First Bank, since the major asset in IDFC is the holding which it has in IDFC First Bank. And as you said, they're going to simplify the structure, and some sort of a proposal is expected whereby IDFC shareholders eventually get some stake back in IDFC First Bank. And since IDFC First Bank has rallied the way it has, post the kind of Q1 or the Q2 earnings commentary or pre-earnings commentary which came, I think we are seeing good interest coming into IDFC as well. Maybe I suspect that IDFC is trading at a slight discount to IDFC First Bank when eventually it will get merged. So there could be a bit of an arbitrage opportunity over there, which is why I think investors are getting into IDFC so as to eventually own shares of IDFC First Bank, which has been a stellar performer over the past 2-3 quarters also.
Okay, since we're talking about banks, it would be very helpful to pull up the chart of Axis Bank. Not only is the stock up 2.5% today, but it's up about almost about 20% this year. So from the lows of, this is today's chart, but if you pull up a one-year chart, you'll see that from the lows of 600 in June, the stock has had a really steady run up until 805 now. Dipan, good afternoon. My colleague Abhishek put out a note on the banking numbers, and Axis Bank seems like it's going to do the best of the lot between ICICI, HDFC and Axis. Would you buy this stock ahead of the earnings this season?
Yeah, good afternoon, Sonia. Absolutely. I think the best trading bet is to buy all these banks before the earnings. It's going to be a golden quarter for the entire banking industry. The NPA costs are going to be at, I would say, multi-quarter or multi-year lows. And we are seeing good pickup in credit. So you'll see higher net interest income. And generally, the fee-based income also should do very well. And overall, I think bonds have been pretty much stable. So I don't think you can expect much of a hit over there. So it's going to be a great earnings season for the banks. And based on what Axis Bank has reported, I think it should come out with a stellar set of numbers. So positive on all these banks, Axis Bank included. I think it's a good trading opportunity. Even from a long-term perspective, the top 4-5 private sector banks seem to be getting into the mode where they can give compounded earnings for the next 2-3 years or so.
Thoughts on Zee, Deepan? Good afternoon.
Yeah, Prashant, good afternoon.
Any thoughts on Zee? It did say a bit of a gap down earlier. Big move, it's come up. It's just about 1.33% lower. Lots of chatter around this one, and maybe we can talk about this with Nimish a little later. But any thoughts fundamentally from here for Zee?
See, I think if the company gets merged with Sony, then automatically investors will pay a higher price to earnings multiple. There was a major disappointment after the Q1 numbers. Hopefully, it will get corrected in Q2, Q3 because advertising would have picked up and subscription revenues also should do better. But the real kicker in Zee is whether the P multiple expands post-merger. And I think it will. So to that extent, investors can expect a decent return from Zee. But there are a lot of risk factors in the industry per se and the business model of the combined entity, given the disruption taking place in the media industry. But nonetheless, I think downside is pretty much limited, I would say, in Zee at this point of time. And upsides are good because if the merger goes through, then automatically you're looking at an MNC, so-called MNC media company, and there's always a lot of fancy around the MNC tag whenever a company gets converted to an MNC. We expect improvement in corporate governance standards, and that can be expected in this case as well.
Dipan, open-ended question, but we've seen some very heavy rains in October across India. There's been this lingering monsoon. Is this going to have any impact on fertilizer names or any companies in agriculture, any listed impact as you would see it?
Not really. I think the season for the fertilizer companies is over and done with. And actually, a lot of regulation and reforms have taken place in the fertilizer industry on the subsidy allocation and the subsidy disbursement, which to an extent has got unnoticed. I mean, we hardly cover fertilizers anywhere. It's not on the radar of many investors as well. But these are great companies and they've been performing well last several quarters or so. Of course, there are volatility in earnings. valuation-wise very attractive, decent return on equity, and gradually expanding their capacity. And as such, I think pretty decent entry barriers as well. So I would be intuitively quite positive on fertilizer companies. Go for the larger ones, Coromandel, Chambal. I think they look quite interesting. Or both of these companies are trying to move up the value chain by getting into crop protection as well. And as and when that proportion of the revenue goes up, you could expect higher operating profit margins as well. So I think that fertilizer also could do well over the next 2-3 quarters or even longer than that. And hopefully, I think this monsoon has not had much. This excess rain which we have seen post monsoon will not have much of an impact on their revenues and profitability.
Okay, well, the other space that has been moving around and we addressed earlier was mid-cap IT. So KPIT Technologies is having a very good run this afternoon. It's up almost about 3% or so. Persistent Systems is up only 1% today, but this month has had a really smooth run. I mean, from the lows this month, Persistent Systems is up almost about 10% or so. The chart should come up for you. Okay, that's a 6.5% rally this month. And then you have, of course, names like Mindtree and Cyient that report their numbers tomorrow. Dipan, this is a space that you tracked, you loved, but now you're a bit cautious on. If you had to pick any stock that you would buy into now, which one would it be?
Sonia, IT has to be played to the mid-cap route only. We are seeing consistently that the large-cap IT companies are growing at growth rates lower than the mid-cap IT companies. And that trend may continue for many quarters or even many years as well. So I'm a great fan of mid-cap IT. We've seen decent amount of correction over there. I know that it is on the expensive side. It trades at a premium to the likes of Infosys, TCS, but I would say those multiples are justified because a lot of these IT companies, mid-cap ones, are focusing on select verticals or select IPs, and they've got very good connects with clients, which is why they're able to grow the business pretty much well. And even mid-sized projects coming through to them can make a huge difference in their earnings. So we're very positive. Usual disclosure that we and our clients are invested. We like companies like Tata Elxsi, Persistent, KPIT, Intellect Design, Happiest Minds. I think the underlying trend in all of them is that they have something different as compared to some of the other run-of-the-mill IT companies.
You know, Dipan, appreciate you joining in with those thoughts. As always, it's a pleasure. Thanks indeed. You know, Mazgaon Dock is having quite a session. It was so yesterday that rally